The film starts with Chris meeting his fiancée, Morgan, inside a shipping container before leaving for his duty as a deep-sea diver. His job is to fit pipelines 1,000 feet underwater, a challenging task. Afterward, he heads to Clipper Key, where he meets Duncan after passing by some staff. As they move forward, we see a setup of heavy machinery on the ship. Next, we are introduced to a group of divers, including Chris, preparing for a 28-day diving mission. Craig arrives and explains the pipeline installation task, dividing the team into 3 groups, A, B, and C. Team A consists of Duncan, Chris, and Dave, who must work together. After Craig leaves, Chris tries to start a conversation with Dave, but quickly realizes that Dave is serious and avoids unnecessary talk. Chris walks away, and Duncan praises him to Dave, mentioning their previous work together. Later, all teams head to their respective chambers. In their chamber, Chris places a photo of Morgan beside his bed. Dave notices and advises him to focus on work. Duncan reassures Chris that Dave is always like this. Once everyone is settled, Craig announces that the doors will be sealed. Each team confirms their positions, and we see the doors to the 3 chambers close. Craig monitors them through CCTV and communicates via microphone. The ship then departs for the open sea, and we get a glimpse of the diver's daily routine, including exercise, relaxation, and meals. During a meal, Duncan reveals that this will be his last mission after 20 years of service. His teammates express concern upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Chris stays updated on Morgan's routine throughout the day. Later, the ship encounters a severe storm, and the divers and Tot continue working despite the dangerous conditions. In the control room, the team discusses the storm in the North Sea and decides that they must begin their dive near the manifold. In the middle of the night, Craig wakes up Team A, including Chris, and instructs them to leave their chamber and head to the diving bell. The team gathers essential equipment like knives and compasses before making their way to the bell. Dave tells Chris to follow his lead, making it clear that he doesn't think much of him. Once inside the bell, the door closes and they are lifted from the saturation chamber. The bell shakes as it is lowered into the stormy sea, marking the start of their dangerous mission. As the storm rages, the bell descends to 300 feet. Duncan opens the door and adjusts the water temperature, preparing the divers. Dave is the first to exit, fully equipped with oxygen tanks and a safety helmet. He jumps into the sea and reports to the head office, followed by Chris. Both divers descend to the seafloor, carrying a connector to attach to the manifold. Dave and Chris successfully connect the connector, powering up the manifold and lighting it up. As they enter the manifold, warning alarms go off in the control room and troubleshooting messages flash on the screens. Dave and Chris stay focused on their task, unaware of the chaos unfolding outside. Suddenly, in the head office, alarms blare as the ship's thrusters go offline, throwing the room into a frenzy. Dave notices the ship shifting out of position and quickly tells Chris to exit the manifold. They climb upward, reaching the top of the structure and updating the head office. However, as Chris ascends, his umbilical cord gets tangled in the manifold's connector. The ship rocks violently in the raging storm, and Chris struggles to free himself. As he tugs on the rope, it accidentally disconnects the connector from the manifold, shutting off power and plunging everything into darkness. Meanwhile, Duncan provides extra umbilical cords, but they are running out in the diving bell. Chris remains trapped, unable to move up or down, caught in the middle of the chaos. Everyone in the head office and the diving team watches in fear. Will Chris escape, or will he remain stranded in the stormy sea, stuck to the manifold? Chris's umbilical cord tightens around him, making it harder to breathe. Dave instructs him to switch to his bailout system, but that only gives him 10 more minutes of oxygen. The control room notices the emergency, and Dave reassures Chris that he will come back to rescue him. However, Chris must stay at the top of the manifold. If he moves, Dave might not be able to find him in the massive turbulent sea. Just as Dave continues guiding Chris, a powerful gust of wind causes the ship to lurch violently. Chris's umbilical cord stretches to its limit, then snaps. He plummets away from the manifold. At the same time, Dave gets pulled upward toward the ship, losing sight of Chris in the darkness. Dave climbs back into the diving bell, while Duncan frantically tries to pull Chris's umbilical cord, only to realize that it's broken. Fear grips the team. Dave returns to the bell and informs Duncan about what happened. In the control room, Craig is deeply concerned about his divers, and discusses their options with the captain, desperately trying to figure out a way to save Chris. Now, Chris has less than 8 minutes of oxygen left. He ignites a flare in the pitch black sea, calling out for Duncan and Dave. Disoriented and struggling to understand his location, he realizes that his compass has stopped working. He waves the flare, using its light to scan the water, desperately searching for the manifold and trying to reach the top as Dave instructed. Meanwhile, in the control room, the captain turns to Officer Hannah for help in maneuvering the ship to rescue Chris. But Hannah hesitates. Steering the ship in this deadly storm could put everyone at risk. The captain and Hannah work together to control the ship. Meanwhile, Chris finally reaches the manifold, but there are less than 4 minutes of oxygen left. Chris, breathing heavily, starts climbing the manifold. The water pressure and fear of death weigh on him, but he refuses to give up. He struggles, slips, and tries again. Finally, he reaches the top, completely exhausted. As he lies there, he thinks about Morgan. Morgan, far away, misses Chris deeply. She is worried, and for good reason. Chris is facing life-threatening conditions. On the manifold, Chris feels hopeless. His breathing slows. Just as Morgan thinks of him, his eyes close, and darkness takes over. His oxygen is gone. Inside the Belle, Duncan and Dave worry about their teammate. In the control room, Craig is also concerned. Hannah and the captain continue working to keep the ship stable. Craig tries to find Chris using the ROV. When he locates him, he sees Chris lying on the manifold, barely moving, his eyes closed. There are no clear signs of breathing. Craig tells Andrew, the ROV pilot, to use the ROV to bring Chris up, but Andrew explains that the ROV is only used for retrieving dead bodies. With no other choice, Craig takes control himself, determined to save Chris. Craig carefully moves the ROV toward Chris, trying to grab him, but it's not easy. Chris is unconscious, and Craig struggles to get a firm grip. After multiple attempts, he finally hooks onto Chris's strap and starts pulling him up. Suddenly, Chris gets stuck. His strap is tangled in the wreckage. Chris has now been without oxygen for over 16 minutes, but somehow he is still alive. In the Belle, Duncan tells Dave about 2 divers who died in a similar situation. One body was never found. He becomes emotional, not wanting Morgan to suffer the same loss. In the control room, the DPO restores the thrusters, re-establishing communication between the control room and the Belle. Craig informs Duncan and Dave of Chris's exact location. Without hesitation, Dave prepares to dive. Duncan, however, worries. He doesn't want to lose both Chris and Dave. Dave exits the Belle and gets clearance from the control room. He moves carefully through the water as Craig continues monitoring Chris with the ROV. Chris is still unconscious, but somehow still alive. Dave reaches the manifold, unlocks Chris's strap, and secures him to his umbilical. Despite the weight of Chris and the unstable ship movements, Dave manages to bring him back to the Belle. Duncan quickly pulls Chris inside and removes his helmet. Chris is extremely pale. He has been without oxygen for over 28 minutes. Duncan gives him first aid, sharing his breath, but Chris doesn't respond. Just when it seems all hope is lost, Chris suddenly gasps for air. Duncan lifts him and sits him down. Dave climbs into the Belle, and soon the control room receives word. Chris is breathing. However, he remains unconscious. Duncan and Dave try to talk to him, hoping for a response, but he doesn't react. Believing it's too late, Duncan and Dave feel crushed. They think they have lost him. Then, suddenly, Chris opens his eyes, looks at Dave, and starts talking. Joy erupts inside the Belle. Duncan and Dave rush to Chris's side. In the control room, Craig is overjoyed. The entire team celebrates. Chris has survived. Chris is confused by everyone's emotional reaction. He doesn't realize how close he was to death. In the control room, Craig praises the captain's efforts, and the team shares in the moment. Soon after, Craig informs Team A that they will return to the surface chamber. This entire rescue was only possible because of good leadership. If Craig had not stepped in, Chris might not have survived. Later, Chris rests in the decompression chamber where Dave takes care of him. Chris learned he was unconscious for 40 minutes before being rescued. He feels guilty for worrying Morgan, as he had promised to stay safe before leaving. Dave leaves Chris to rest and looks at pictures of his daughters, becoming emotional. Meanwhile, Chris recovers in the chamber, undergoing decompression. He updates Morgan about his well-being, but doesn't tell her the full story. Instead, he says there was a small problem with the ship. He doesn't want to worry her. As the days pass, the chamber doors open and all teams exit. Duncan says goodbye to Chris and returns to his chamber, pretending he forgot his pillow. But in truth, he just wants to spend a little more time there. It's his last deep sea mission. Craig appreciates Duncan's dedication. Chris finally reunites with Morgan and tells her everything. She is anxious but relieved. He reassures her, promising that no matter what happens, he will always come back to her. Together, they head home. Chris was without oxygen for 29 minutes, yet he suffered no permanent damage. Experts believe a unique combination of water depth and temperature helped, but they still can't fully explain how he survived. In my opinion, it was nothing short of a miracle. After this life-changing event, Chris and Morgan get married and start their new life together. 3 weeks later, Chris, Duncan, and Dave return to the North Sea to complete their mission, bringing this incredible true story to an end.